Hi, welcome to the Delaplane Arts Center. This is our November Art Matters talk. I'm the exhibitions manager here at the Delaplane, Corey Fry. Let me know if you need anything, if you have any questions or anything. A few housekeeping things before we get started. All new exhibitions here for this month. So there's plenty of new artwork to see. You're sitting in half of our Veterans exhibition, which I'll talk to you about here in a few minutes, the Veterans Show. But there's also Chris Madden's paintings, Chris over there, in the side gallery, which is through the East Gallery here. You'll see it off to the side. And then we have Michael Douglas Jones upstairs and Cynthia Scott-Johnson's work upstairs as well. So take some time, wander around, and check out the artwork that's here. So Cynthia Scott-Johnson is a military nomad, both as a child and an adult. She's now settled in Frederick, Maryland, and as a working artist, and she's the owner of the Gaslight Gallery here in Frederick, which maybe she can tell us about their opening exhibition as well. Cynthia is an award-winning visual communication strategist with specialized expertise in TV production and distribution. She's co-owned and operated a seasonal art gallery on Cape Cod from 1996 to 2002. Recently, she's completed her MFA in visual art at Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She continues the lifelong practice of creating and exhibiting her artwork. Then we have Michael Douglas Jones, whose work is on the second floor. Michael Douglas Jones was born in Tacoma Park, Maryland in 1950. He served in the U.S. Air Force as a staff sergeant illustrator from 1969 to 1973 and earned a degree of Associate of Arts in illustration with honors from Montgomery College in 1976. Jones has exhibited in solo shows here at the Delaplane, Frederick Community College, and the Venable Nestlage Gallery. He's participated in many group shows, including the Arlington Arts Council Gallery, Marin Price Galleries, and the Dar Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. In 1990, Jones became a founding member of TAG, the Artist Gallery here in Frederick, and he currently works and lives in Frederick. And he's also a partner artist at Gallery 322 on Market Street here in Frederick. So, lastly, Christopher Madden is an artist living and working in Augusta, West Virginia. His focus is now primarily on painting in oils, but in his long career, he's been an illustrator for the U.S. Army, a cartoonist, caricaturist, a teacher, and most impressively, one of the few engraving craftsmen in the world trained and charged with creating the intaglio engraved images that adorn U.S. paper currency. During Christopher's career, he also engraved postage stamps and the official portrait of Barack Obama, and the official portrait of Barack Obama. He retired in 2019 as a lead banknote picture engraver for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing in Washington, D.C. Christopher now paints full-time at his studio and also maintains a residence and teaching practice in Newmarket, Maryland. He also is the president of the Master Art Copyists, a group of dedicated painters selected to study in person the master works in the National Gallery of Art. Christopher's work is represented in the TAG Gallery, the Artist Gallery here in Frederick, Maryland. And I'm going to invite up our first speaker, Cynthia Scott-Johnson.
So I've got my notes here to go along with this. I'm Cynthia Scott, and my dad was an Air Force pilot, and he moved around for 20 years or so till they retired up on Cape Cod. So I went to like 12 schools in 12 years, including living in South America, where I learned Spanish. I went to all-girls Catholic schools and had English as a second language. So because of my upbringing, I am bicultural and bilingual. But the focus here for this show has been about bubbles and just perceptual bubbles. Let me see, this moves like that, yeah. So people do see what they see. What they see, or what they perceive, better said, is just a little tiny bit of visual sensory input. The rest is imagination, education, belief, expectation, memory. Those are really the factors that are dominant into how we perceive things. The eyes, our actual neurological intake is minimal. So that's kind of where I'm starting from. I did do an MFA program up at Lesley University in Massachusetts, and I went in with the intention of doing my tarot cards. It's a 78 images, and I had, gotten a start on some of this, but the direction was pushed me away from illustration into more conceptual stuff, because that school is more oriented in that direction. So, so this geodesic dome that you can see in the picture was actually the final version of my thesis project for my MFA program. And as part of that, you can see I started out, oh wait, let me get to the next slide. This is an example of my tarot card imagery. And the Fool, that's the one on the right, is by Pamela Coleman. It's Rider-Waite, which is one of the more popular decks. Hers was done in 1910. Mine is contemporary. It's a self-portrait when I got an incentive to write an NF-16. And I have the Joker is on the armband as a reference to the Fool, the Joker, which is the last vestige of the major arcana in the playing deck, the modern playing deck. But again, I was pushed away from that direction, although I am still working on that tarot card deck. But in the meantime, while I was up there in Boston, I went to the MIT Museum. Oh, here we go. And I saw the beautiful brain exhibit up there. And these on the left are drawings by Dr. Santiago Ramón y Cajal. He's a Spanish neuroanatomist, and he produced thousands of drawings with a microscope, actually looking at the brain, looking at neurons under a microscope. So these are very realistic illustrations of neurons. But mine got a little more fanciful with their eyes. And actually, the artist that's opening at Gaslight Gallery was my artist mentor for my MFA program. And she helped me actually edit down my busyness and down to just the eye and not anything else. I mean, I had other things going on. So we simplified the aesthetic of this geodesic dome project. But one of the key parts of it, this you can see in the bottom here, that was the geodesic dome installation we did in 2019 in Georgetown in DC. And in the course of doing tarot card readings, I asked people to write down their question, and then I collage it to these 56 by 56 by 56 panels that have the neuron prints and collage, and people's actual written questions are also collaged on. So you get to see these anonymous questions as a sculptural object, and we go inside and do readings. But anyway, that's how we get to the bubbles, because I'm very much interested in even like how people, like I don't pretend to have any particular psychic ability. Just I've got some age on me, so I have a little wisdom and intuition, but it's just interesting to see how people respond to the readings, because sometimes there is this aha moment. And the brain is supposed to be right and left brain, so the left brain is constantly suppressing right brain perception, which can be those aha moments, those like, oh, I get it all of a sudden things. And that sometimes happens because the brain is also this association machine. So you see the images from the tarot card pictures, and then the meanings behind it in association with your question, and you kind of come up with your own answers often. So anyway, that was the direction I was going. There's an example of it. It can also be a very social activity, because the Persian Hafez cards are very similar. They're very ancient, as are the tarot cards, and it's a communal way of putting down your phone and actually having direct human interaction. You say a question out loud, and you draw a card from the Hafez ancient poet, and you interpret the poetry in, along with your question, and you, as a group you come up with answers. So it's more of a social activity in that sense. So that was the end of the academic part. I went to Florida after that, and then my neurons all of a sudden took on color. And so this is my mascara on my seeing eye. Let's see. So the whole series of these watercolor paintings and some mixed media is centered on the idea of these perceptual bubbles. So this is the fisheye, which was a tag gallery at one point. The top one is named An Eye for an Eye. These were done when I was up on Cape Cod, taking care of my parents who are in their 90s. I had a spirograph machine, and so I was having fun playing with spirograph. The top one is An Eye for an Eye, and my dad named that one. But basically, still with this idea that individuals curate their own media consumption on these ubiquitous screens, everybody's got them, and we inhabit these separate informational bubbles even. Let's see. This is Falcon Vibe. The portrait part was a photo reference of my daughter. We went to an Air Force Academy football game, and they have the falcon that's flying around the open air stadium, and then the handler came over to her, and she got to handle this fabulous bird. So there's like this kind of vibe of like excitement, of rapture, that she was in that environment. So I was trying to just sort of capture that sort of feeling. So we inhabit these perceptual bubbles that shift with your mood, and they even change with season, So this is a beach bubble, spending a lot of time on Cape Cod. But there are financial bubbles. You've heard of that. There are informational bubbles, bliss bubbles, fear bubbles, bouncing baby bubbles is where I'm at these days because I've got grandchildren. So yeah, these information bubbles that we create for ourselves. And I would notice that my mood would shift with the seasonal shifts too. So that was another consideration. It was going into the fall. And then in the spring, there's the lily of the valley. But I was looking at it from a microscopic perspective. Like, this is the stomata. The background with the red lines is a representation of how they actually look in a microscope. And I got very seasonal here. We got your spring, summer, fall, and winter bubbles. And I was looking at, there was one artist, Imran Qureshi, who's a Pakistani artist. He did an installation in New York City that was interesting. He had this red color splattered all over a courtyard space. And it looked like blood splatter, like it had been a massacre there. But it would resolve into these exquisite, like florals. And so it was kind of along this line. I started doing these kind of repetitive floral patterning with color and looking at sacred geometry symbols. And then I started thinking about chakras, and I really am not any expert on this at all. But just the concept of the red kundalini energy, the root to rise, feeling of the red color and the bubbles emanating, coming from that energetic perspective. And finally, upstairs you can see these the crown consciousness bubble. So that basically, this idea, the spiritual one, that you're looking at life through this spiritual lens, if you will. So again, there's obviously so many different ways that people perceive things, and it really is real to them. And so just awareness of your own bubble is certainly a first step toward empathy. And I think that's one of the ingredients that we all could use these days. So, thank you very much.
push this button. It's technology. Hey, I'm Michael Douglas Jones, and I'm up on the hallway gallery with my show, The Weathered Inch. And first I'll tell you, since we're doing a veterans show, I will tell you a quick little story about being a veteran and how it really changed the way I became an artist. So take your mind back before most of you were born, 1968. I was a senior in high school and getting ready to graduate, and I couldn't afford to go to college. I had 3 brothers and a single mom, and so I went to my art teacher, who was the light of my life, that I spent 3 or 4 years with, and told her, her name was Mrs. Dowla, and I said, now I've enlisted in the Air Force because I can't afford to go to college right now. Maybe on the GI Bill I'll be able to go, but for now, this is what I've got to do, because this is during Vietnam, and if you didn't go to college, you were pretty likely to be drafted. And if you were drafted, you were going to go to Vietnam, probably. So she said, listen, just say you're an artist. And I just looked at her and said, oh yeah, have you ever seen a boot camp movie? I'm going to go in there and say, I'm an artist. And she said, just do it for me. Just say you're an artist. So I'm in boot camp, and it is like all the boot camp movies. It is hard, but by the time I got in, I was 19, and I was fit. I'd grown up on a farm, so I knew how to use a rifle. So I was doing very well in boot camp. And then one day we go to get this little building. They're all like temporary buildings, and it was in Texas, a hot July afternoon. And we go into this little building, my little troop and we're going to get our military occupation. This is what you're going to do for the next 4 years. And so we go in there, and there's a blackboard, and the sergeant at the front is saying, okay, here's your choices up on the blackboard. Just list 1, 2, or 3, which one you want. I look at the blackboard, and number 1 is a cook. Now, I'd been through KP, so I knew I didn't want to be a cook. That wasn't going to be a good thing. Second was security police. So, okay, that's probably a ticket to Vietnam, right into the war zone. And then the third was parachute rigger. Okay, there's not a lot of parachute rigging going on in the state side, so I figured, okay, what am I gonna do? And then those words from my art teacher come back, and I say, because the sergeant then said, if you have any special skills like mechanics or anything like that, or radio working or playing with the radios, just let us know. And I'm the only one I raised my hand, and I'm getting ready because the sergeant and the drill sergeant they could put you in your place or put you in Leavenworth if they wanted to. And I said, he said, yes, airman. I said, I'm an artist. And he looked at me, and I'm cringing, and he says, oh, we've got a test for that. Follow that trooper right there. And so I follow this trooper. I go into this room. I swear, 2 hours. It was a book test, pretty much like you read a sentence and which fold. They have pictures of airmen and says, drawing, and say which one of these pictures is the fold correct when you're looking at it. So I said, well, obviously it's the one that looks like a fold. And so I got a 95 on that test. It was a longer test. That was just one question I remember as being absurd. But so they shipped me after boot camp. They shipped me out to Topeka, Kansas, and for the next 4 years I was an illustrator, on the job training. And I didn't go to Vietnam, and I could have stayed in forever and been retired by now. But I was a hippie and wanted to grow my hair long. So I didn't stay. But I learned that day that my art teacher didn't say, tell him you study art. She didn't say, tell him you want to be an artist when you grow up. She said, tell him you're an artist. And that day when I said, I'm an artist, that's all I've ever said about myself for the last 50 years, is I am an artist, and you better do the work to be an artist. It's not about, I want to be the best artist. It's not goal-oriented. It's every morning you get up and you do the work. And if you do the work, then it doesn't matter how much money you make. Well, Mrs. Jones has a different opinion on that. But it doesn't matter to me how much money I make. It's that I am doing the work and I'm successful with myself. So this show, The Weathered Inch, I've always had the kind of a motto that art should call your name from across the room and then whisper certain secrets when you come in close. So I am very meticulous in every inch of the art that I do. And these pieces, the biggest I work now is 16 by 20. And these are, I call them assemblage because I don't have a better term for it. But I don't do sketches or anything. I have this vision of rhythm. What is this piece going to look like? And the number one question I get asked after people see my work is, oh, you must love to go to antique stores and flea markets and find this stuff. Well, I start the other way. I have a vision in my head of what I want it to be, and then I make it from there. I don't find things and then say, oh, well, that'll look nice if I put that over here with this. It doesn't work that way for me. So I have to, once I have that vision of what I want this to look like, I have to make these things. You can't find in any antique store these kind of medieval iron bindings for books. You have to make that. And so what these are is kind of a metaphorical view of that book that you carry inside the breast pocket of your soul coat. It's your memories, all the letters you ever got, all the lessons you've learned, everything that's come from the time you were born that you store inside of your heart. And as we get older, or not even as we get older, it's just that these things start to fall apart. You lose your memory a little bit, and you can't remember that girl from first grade, and you have to keep reinforcing this book, putting things on the binders, tying it with twine, and it's held together with your heart and hope. And so that's what this is supposed to represent. And let's see. So this is another piece upstairs. With this piece, like a lot of pieces, the way I get my inspiration for what is supposed to be in that book that you're going to see is I'll be looking for something else. Like in this case, I was looking for images of bees because my father, among many other things that he was a beekeeper. So I was looking for some old images of bees, and I heard this expression, tanging the bees. And so I looked it up, and it's like one of those things when you're on the computer and you look up something and you're off on a rabbit hole and find all these other things. So I started studying tanging the bees, which is a very old method of when the bees swarm, you take your dinner bell or your pots and pans and go outside and bang them or tang them, and they will follow you to wherever you want them to be. So that was the thing that I was doing with this piece. Now each of these pieces, when I said it starts with a vision of rhythm, they start with words. I don't sketch. I write either a poem or a little essay or a little short story, and then I put together the story, and then give clues to what the story is about in the book. But there's not just one story in the book. There's a million stories in the book. All of you are in my book. And I'm in your book, whether you like it or not. It's just no matter where you see somebody, you inherit their stories. Every story they tell you, even if they just say hi on the street, that's just my opinion, of course. So, and let's see, let's keep on going. So all of these pieces have that one clue that represents the story that I put in. So I always put an envelope on the back of the piece, and put the story in that envelope. And I tell people when they buy the piece that when they take it home, now it's their book, they put their stories in the back envelope, because from now on, those are their stories. This piece is called, well, it's actually called, I wrote it wrong, because sometimes I forget, but it's On a Dew Path. And you'll notice in some of them that I will also put, besides, it's almost like I'm putting on a play, and all of these are characters that I use repeatedly, like keys and rulers and envelopes. And in this one, I put in this little CDV, carte de visite, or a cigarette card, or these tiny little cards that have photographs on them. And what I take is I'll take a photograph, and then I will manipulate it in Photoshop to make it look like something else. So there's probably 4 different photographs in there, and I work really big and make these images, and then take them down to about 2 to 3 inches before I put them in the piece. And I want, since this book has been around forever, I also want to keep it timeless. I don't want to put anything into the piece that shows any particular time period. So it could be 2023, it could be 1923, it could be 1823. I just want it to look like it has always been there, which it has. All the stories have always been there. So with this piece, this is to show you about what I was just talking about with the CDVs, taking the photograph and then making it into a small little piece. This is a photograph I took down on Court Street of my favorite building there, but to put it into the piece of art, I had to take Photoshop and take out the stop sign, the parking meters, the wreath on the door, any wires, all the lines that are in the road, the street signs, everything had to be taken out so that it still has that timeless piece, so I don't give it away. Because when you look at it, I want you to automatically, you see the way, when you look at art, you see first with your heart and then your mind. And it can take just like a second before your mind starts telling you another story. And so I want you to first see it with your heart and then start thinking about it. This is another piece called Black and Blueprints. And some of these items are a little older, but all of these pieces in here are not old. I use cardboard, mat board, and I'll go to Wonder Books and buy their 95-cent cookbooks that they can't really sell. And I take them, cut them apart, and use the bindings. I will drill holes in them and then put in plugs, or in this case, a new character that I have is this kind of cribbage board measurement, since it's about measuring. And then, so I'll cut them apart, put them back together again, paint them with iron filings, and then rust that piece. So it looks like it's old, but it's not old. But it's what I was thinking when I saw it. And I'll also, let me see if I have a picture of, let me go back for just 1 second to this one. I also put a lot of brushes and pens and such in there, but so what I have to do, like these pens, in order to be in this piece, they had to be a particular size. So I will take some old pen nibs and then take a dowel rod, sand it down so it has it look like a pen handle, and that way it can be 4 inches long, 6 inches long, 12 inches long. And that's how you make it into that. Now, I'm always torn when I'm explaining these things. Oh, and so you can see that is a particular size. And you see that little piece that goes across there? That is, you know when you buy coffee and it comes in a little bag and it has that plastic thing that keeps it all held together? Well, I couldn't throw that away. And I drink a lot of coffee. So what I do is I take it and I paint it with iron filings, and then I rust it, and then it becomes part of the piece. Most of the time, I use it to hold the pins in place. So right down here, it's holding the key in place. But then I really liked it right across there. And as I was saying, I usually when I talk to a person one-on-one, I have to figure out whether they're into the magic of it or they want to see behind the studio curtain. Because I don't want to, I want you to get the whole story of it that you're making up. And if I start taking it apart, then I'm not sure you're going to like it or not. And one final piece I'm going to show you is a series that I've done where I'm not using book covers anymore. I'm making it much smaller, sort of like a parcel that the mail carrier would be walking around with to bring you your mail. You know, that romantic guy. The postal carrier to me is the most romantic guy because I'm always thinking he's going to bring me something. He's going to bring me something, a love letter, or something besides the Pepco bill or the mortgage. He's going to bring me this thing. So I have this adolescent anticipation that he's going to bring that. So that is this piece, and again, another small picture that I took over off of Ballinger Creek of a couple deer. So, and if you have any other questions, or any questions, you can ask them, or I will be upstairs hanging out in the hallway with Cynthia. Anybody?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So it's super interesting. I was wondering what's the relationship between this and, you know, the boîte, you know, from the surrealist era, Duchamp, and boîte and valise, and the idea of putting everything in within a thin, you know, a box or like a confined space, like exploded, something that explodes.
Well, yeah, well, when I was younger, Joseph Cornell just thrilled me, but I loved his stuff, and I would always make boxes as a kid and put all of the stuff in there. But later on, one of my artist friends told me I was a dilettante because I wasn't focused on something. So for the next 20 years, I was a very focused, highly realistic oil painter. And until I couldn't, I didn't have anything else to say in that. But putting things in boxes is the way I like that because James Joyce in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man was talking about proper art and how there were certain, when you put together a piece of art, it had a perfectly framed, it was not just the frame, but it was what you wanted to see and where you wanted your art to be, where you wanted it to start and where you wanted it to stop. And his definition of proper art was art that didn't elicit a desire or any of the emotions. It was that he wanted you to have, he thought that proper art suggested aesthetic arrest, where you stop, you're still, you're looking at the art, and you and the art are both still together, and you go, aha. And that's another thing that I just want. I don't want to tell you anything. I want you to be able to see that art and just be at peace with it. And realize that that art, what I'm saying in that art, and that book is the same book that you have inside of you. Okay? There you go. Let's chase some flies.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Madden, and just to touch on what Michael said, we have a very similar kind of origin story in the military sense, in that, like Michael, I came out of Appalachia, and there was no talk of college. That was something that was completely foreign. So the military was my ticket to do that, and I also became an illustrator. Of course, now I was in Army basic training, which wasn't Air Force basic training.
Oh, come on.
So, hard times, man. Hard times, you know? At any rate, it was something I had to do. As an artist my whole life, growing up in an Appalachian culture, it was akin to being an alien, you know, who are you, that kind of thing. But you learn to adapt. And after art school and college, I was recruited to become this guy in Washington that engraves the paper money, and that was for 35 years, and it was a 10-year apprenticeship after college. And they called you a lot of things, but not doctor and anything like that, but it was a good career for an artist. They literally pay you with your own work. Today I want to talk about myself as a painter, as an artist, and when I did decide to retire about almost 5 years ago, unbelievably, I knew I wanted to just paint. I wanted to be a painter. I've always admired painters. And someone once told me, actually a very good painter once told me, you can't be a part-time painter. And it's very true. I mean, I always tell people now that, you know, the best home run hitter in baseball is also usually the strikeout king. You know, because you have to get in there and you have to, as Michael said, do the work. You have to put in the repetition. You have to apply yourself. It's determination. Talent is such a weird thing. I mean, it's whatever talent is. I always tell my students that talent is probably the ability to turn shape around in your head. You can intellectually and imaginatively turn shape around in your head. Everything else is determination and hard work. But as a painter, and as I said, after my career ended, I knew I had a lot to learn, and I'm still learning it. And I should back this all up and say I want to thank the Delaplane for allowing me to share my work with you in this show, and for all the relationship that we've had over the years. I want to thank Corey for all his hard work, and all the rest of the staff. You guys are terrific. So, chasing flies. There's an old adage. Let's see what's, maybe I refer to, yeah, there it is. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Well, so as a painter, and growing up in my isolation in Appalachia, reading was a salvation for me in terms of growing an imagination. The television was there with things that captured my imagination, like Looney Tunes and Planet of the Apes. Mad Magazine, though I didn't have any money, you know, I could find those maybe at yard sales, or I would scrounge up, you know, this and that and hold on to them like gold. And they did form, to a great deal, the opinion is out there of a bad sense of humor, good sense of humor, weird sense of humor, whatever you want to say, but imagination is the key there. I mean, and this idea that my satire, which again, coming out of that mold, satire I find is it's fun for me. It's just how my brain works. And I think rather than get into the weeds about philosophical approaches to my art, I'd like Michael rather reflect more on the process and maybe like how that stream of consciousness works for me. How do you get from point A to point Z with your putting together the work in your mind, and then as you work it out in your medium. So, okay, and you know, I do a certain type of art that I want to do, and it will evolve, as all of us artists were going to evolve. Who knows what I'll be doing 20 years from now? Hopefully not time. But my opinions are my own as an artist, you know, and so by what I do, and I would say that no other artist should infer that their art is the art to do. I mean, frankly, art and creativity, whether you're baking a loaf of bread or nailing a structure together, or painting or sculpting or taking pictures, it's its own reward. I mean, that's its own validation. is just to do the art. The creativity of it is cathartic. You know, it's something where it feeds your soul. It's good for you. It's good for humanity. It's so vital. I mean, even with all the world's troubles and so-called modern art out there, you still see people flock to cultural events. You still see them go around the block for art. I was just in Italy for a month, and you know, the museums were packed with, literally packed, with curious people trying to see and understand man's culture. So yeah, I mean, I do a certain type of art, and everyone else that does their art, it's just as valid. No matter what level they are at, it's what they get out of it. It's the doing of it. The end product is kind of a byproduct of that process, and again, in my opinion. That's the important part. And so I also believe that, you know, it's all interconnected. You know, visual arts, literature, philosophy, to be a kind of a student of culture, I think is super important, not only as an artist, but as a person. I mean, it's not just a two-dimensional kind of thing. It's something that they're all intertwined. And I think that makes whatever art you do that much more accomplished, because there's a reason for it. It's not just, we're not decorators. You know, we're not just making decorations. We're creating expressions of ourselves. We're creating reflections of our culture. You know, math and science, all that stuff is super important, but I would assert that art is just as vital to the fabric of mankind. Little illustration here of art where Thomas Kincaid was the painter of light, and he did all these cottages and these real syrupy, sweet scenes. Not to knock Thomas Kincaid. I wouldn't want to paint like that. And why it's a trap, and it was for Thomas Kincaid, is that this is what his agent said sold. You know, you have to keep making these paintings because this is what's selling. He was actually quite a fine artist. And he ran around with a guy named James Gurney, who is also a super fine artist. But Thomas got locked into this mold of, I got to pump these things out, like Bob Ross, I guess, to an extent. And he ended up killing himself. You know, just couldn't take that kind of cage that he had been put in aesthetically and artistically. And Jan de Heem was a 17th century Dutch still life painter. What makes him interesting to me is that even though these are beautifully painted scenes of fruit and whatnot in here, he would infuse them with flies and ants and things because that was his way of probably keeping his sanity, and also inferring the mortality of it, the fleeting time of it. When I was in Italy, I went to the Capuchin crypt where they have these skeletons festooned, decorated with these monks' bodies. They would dig them up after 30 years and take them all apart and festoon them in various positions. They wouldn't let me take pictures, but they did let me draw in there, so I stayed in there. And I got cursed by a gypsy while I was there, so I had the full experience. But anyway, the point I was going to make with what I perceive as this kind of decorative art, although I do like the ants and the bees and that kind of thing, is that people want to walk by them. You know, I've been in the Louvre, and paintings like this will be in a gallery, and people walk by them and go, oh, those are nice. And they keep walking. No, those are nice. Oh, those are nice. And they don't spend any time with them. There's not an interaction. And for me as a painter, that's where I would say, no, it's not for me. It's just not getting me. Whereas in the same gallery in the Louvre, not the same as the Dutch, but in the same museum, you go to Géricault's Raft of the Medusa, this horrendous giant scene of these people that are stranded at sea, and all this cannibalism and suffering and all of this is happening. And you can see these people, I took this picture, you can see these people just schooled around it like a school of fish, trying to understand what's happening there. And so I would assert that it's not, this is getting to a defense of what I do in terms of my work in so far, in that the pretty doesn't seem to capture us as much as the dramatic does. We want to understand the dramatic because there's something in the human psyche that is just, maybe it's a fight or flight thing with cavemen where you're like, well, that looks dangerous. I need to understand what that is. Is it going to kill me or is it okay? Whereas a bunch of flowers, you're kind of like, oh, those are nice. So, point made. Again, this is flashing back to one of the other slides where I was saying that it's all interconnected. And some of my art I think comes out of thinking about some of the work of a philosopher named Jung. And the idea of the unconscious, the idea of how dreams affect what we bring into the world, the idea that an artist is that kind of arbiter or mediator between the unconscious and the conscious for the culture. It's an awesome responsibility if you choose to take it. It can be quite burning. Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche advocated that kind of thing, that the artist was this kind of interpreter. But the danger in that is that it can be very difficult for a person to live in those worlds. So now, to switch gears majorly, Mad Magazine, as I have alluded to, that was a huge influence in terms of satire. As a kid, you know, you really didn't trot out satire that much because in Appalachia you just get beat for it, pretty much. You're being feisty and they get the belt out and beat you to death. So you learn to pick your shots, basically. Which segues into an example of the largest painting I have in here, and getting into my process, my kind of thinking process, my creative process, and how I arrive at these kind of things. This is, with apologies to John Steinbeck, who I very much like as an author. I really tried to lay off the title, but I just couldn't at the end. It was just too dumb, so I had to use it. So this is Apes of Wrath, not Grapes of Wrath, Apes of Wrath. Sorry, John Steinbeck. But now, in its inception, with this, you know, I thought a lot about what happened January 6th. As a veteran, you know, that's had a certain depth to me that I thought about. Put it together, first of all, culturally, what's happening. What do I want to say about this? How do I want to say it? And then when I got into compositional ideas, the first series of drawings I did were just simply a bunch of arrows that worked its way through a composition, and studied some paintings by an artist named Peter Paul Rubens, who did a lot of these battle scenes with these guys all twisted in battle. And he did them compositionally in such a way to direct your eye through the composition where he wanted you to go. So there's that kind of underpinning, that structure that's underneath all that carnage and the imagery. And I would assert that good painting, relies on good composition, and it's an abstract idea. I mean, in its inception, the idea of placement, of shape, where can I arrange shape in a way that's going to intentionally have an effect on the viewer, an effect on the expression of ultimately the message. If it's a narrative, I'm a narrative painter, I like narration in my painting. What's going to promote the effect of that? So it goes back into some Rubens paintings, and then in color. How can you move color through a composition in a way that will direct your eye? And then to string it all together in a kind of a juicy fashion, you know, well, how can I be a real smart ass with this? You know, what do I want to say in satire, satirical? Because I found that satire is an excellent way to push a lot of tough messages across, a lot of tough expression. You just can't make people mad. It's funny in art because aesthetically they go, oh, it's art. I'm not going to be upset. And I've had this painting on exhibit elsewhere, and as like a fly on the wall, I'm kind of like hearing this interaction because frankly that's my pay as an artist. That's what I get paid with, because if they bought this painting, they're going to trade me money, which I also made, you know, literally made the money. So it's a weird exchange. You know, it's like, well, I made that too, and I like this better. So I'll take the money, but it's never my priority. It's never my motivation. I happen to believe that if you monetize your work, it takes the passion out of it. It's not, if it sells, that's a happy byproduct. Okay, fine. What I don't want is someone to say, and I don't think I'm in danger of this here, that'll look great over my couch. That'll match my curtains. Not going to happen with my work, and I'm okay with that. I really wouldn't like to hear that. I'm taking this home, it's going to match my curtains. Oh, don't tell me that. So yeah, there were some happy accidents in this painting where, like for instance, the chimp sign, I didn't realize it actually had a kind of a close relationship. I'm in the studio painting, I went, hey, wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, those letters, NP, okay, that's subtle. And ultimately, and as I said, with people's motivation to make art, the creativity of it, the doing of it is what's important. But ultimately, if you're having fun, you know, this is silly. We're putting daubs of pigment on canvas. It's silly work. We're not breaking rocks here. But if you're enjoying it, have at it. I mean, if you hated doing this, why would you do it? This is a joyful process. It's meditative. Painting, creativity is the best time machine. It's the best painkiller. When I paint at the National Gallery for 5 hours, I get there at 10 in the morning when they open the doors. Gleefully feel like I'm in my own cathedral and go there with a live paintbrush, and they're not arresting me. The first time I did it was a Rembrandt self-portrait, and I'm thinking, this is really like having a gun at the bank. I shouldn't. Are you guys okay with it? You see what I got here? And it's okay, you're in there painting. It's just such a privilege to be able to do that. But when I'm doing it, I get there at 10, I don't take a break for lunch. I don't socialize. If there's a great show across the hallway, I've told my friend Lisa this, who's also a fine artist, and she's here, thank you, that I don't have time to go and see that show because I'm just so appreciative of the time I have to intensely study from these masters. And traditionally, this is how painters became better painters, was to go in and intensely study and see how people that came before you stand on the shoulders of these giants and see how they did the work. It's invaluable as a painter. But I can tell you that those 5 hours go by like that. I look at my watch and say, it can't be, ironically, 3 o'clock, because that's when they want you to start cleaning up. So how did that, I just got here. I'm flabbergasted each and every time, because it happens each and every time. You don't think about it. It's the meditative quality. There's a word called atonement you've heard of. Break that down, at 1 minute. When you paint, you're at 1. It focuses you in a way that I haven't found any drug, alcohol, anything, religion that can do it for me like that does. And that in and of itself is why I want to paint and create for the rest of my life. I'm not a starving artist, I'm an artist with a pension, which is kind of cool. Okay, so this goes into the Rubens thing. So this is very typical Rubens, twisty bodies going through space here. So I have a philosophy as a painter that I think I'm going to cling to for the rest of my life, I think. And that is that I want to use, and this is where the National Gallery helps me, I want to use traditional painting skills and to a level that I want to reach, which I haven't reached and will continue to strive to reach. I want to use those skills in a contemporary voice. I know a lot of really wonderful painters that still paint this. All their paintings are this, and this has been done already. So how can you use these skills in a way that speaks to today's culture? That's, to me, the challenge that I'm interested in. And here we are, reference to Planet of the Apes. I probably should resequence this stuff, but. Okay, so this is Subhumans. Now, how did this come about? There is a nice figure session. I host one here every Sunday if you're interested, but also at Hood College every Friday there's a figure session. A man named Bill Mapes run it, does an excellent job. And then the summertime, this summer, he hired these 2 models who came in. I like to work from the live model because I'm seeing in the round, whereas with the camera you're seeing that compressed space. So working from a live model is my preference. So these 2 people came in and they were dressed in something called steampunk. Now, I'm not ancient, but I'm older, and that one passed me by, like most of the other disco and all that stuff just passed me by. But so I learned, okay, steampunk is like a Victorian industrial mishmash of sorts. And these were 2 excellent models. They're just wonderful models. I love working with them. So they sat, and he has a stick in his hand, and she does have that little weird revolver. But at the same time, which gets into my process, culture, or what was happening in the world was that the Titan submersible thing had just imploded. So I'm painting, and I'm thinking, okay, contextually, okay, these steampunks, where would they be? What does this suggest to me? What's happening in the world today? And you can see how it gets pushed into this industrial idea at first, and then latched into the whole Titanic myth and the pathos of all that. And so in my imagination, this is the path I traveled to develop that idea. How do you put 2 steampunk peoples in a submarine? Why would you do that? Well, that's just the way my little roller coaster brain led me to that type of fun, I think, idea. And then compositionally, the thing about this pose was that there were 2 people, right? And every other pose was like one model, another model. No, I want to have some overlap. I want to have some sort of compositional interest there. So the only pose I found that the bodies were actually working with each other was that side view, which is a difficult thing to do profiles more so than full facial and 3/4. But still, working out those elements, I think this composition kind of leads you through. This wants to bring you back again. So just kind of basic compositional things that are happening here. And there's the Titan moments before. That's their last words there, I think. Okay, rage sale. So it's not too hard to figure out from my roots as I've described them how I might have this storehouse of information in my brain. Hired this model. She's a wonderful person, very interesting person. Comes in, sets for me. You can see how her sitting here, the things that are around her is very much not what's happening here. There's some references here, sure. But what you do with them contextually, again, is what happens within the narration of the work. What do you want to say with it? And, you know, after the events of whenever somebody got elected to now, and the polarization of the country and all this stuff that we've seen and suffered with, this was that kind of reaction to that kind of, well, I grew up in that culture, and So I had a good time with this in a cathartic way of kind of dealing with it. And the textures here, I get into the textures and the quality of the materials. This is a figure and it's a still life, so. And no, there aren't any flies in it, but there is a monkey. So this is a piece at the National Gallery that I did. Valentine di Bologna was an Italian, well, no, he's French actually, but he spent most of his life in Italy, and he was a huge fan of a painter named Caravaggio. The National Gallery does not have any Caravaggios there, sadly, but they had a chance in 1910 or so when they passed on it, now they regret it. However, his work was very aligned with Caravaggio's style, which is chiaroscuro or tenebrism, which is actually just more of a depressed version of chiaroscuro. Very dark paintings, kind of illuminated from almost a single light source. And as I described with doing work at the National Gallery, it's intensely enjoyable, meditative, quality experience for me. But a common question that I get asked by people is, well, what do you do with these things when you're done with them? It's a very good question, because like plagiarism, this isn't my novel. This is this artist. He did the work. It's original. Why do I want to copy something? That's silly. I want to study it intensely, but this becomes an artifact of my experience. If someone wanted to purchase the work, I would actually be less emotionally attached to it because I didn't invest anything of myself in it. I was simply studying the techniques. I want to understand that better. However, getting back to the Alfred E. Newman and the Planet of the Apes and all the silliness I've described, there is that little devil that pops up on my shoulder. And it first did that, I was doing actually a landscape, beautiful landscape by an artist. It wasn't Homer, it was one of the other Western artists. But I was attracted to the techniques. But there was these Indians that were riding back to their teepees way, way in the back of the painting. About that big of a painting. You can only paint 40 inches max, no matter how big the thing is. That's another class. But that's the first time the little devil appeared on my shoulder and said, hey, you should put something in that painting. Make it a little more yours. What would those Indians be riding towards today if they're going back to their pitiful little reservation village? So real tiny in the village next to the wigwams, there's a McDonald's road sign. Very subtle, and I got away with it. You know, no one had a problem with that, so got away with that one. So then it was, uh-oh. So when I got to this painting, which was an intense study of 16th century technique of painting, very much intense layers, Lisa can attest to that from the one she's currently studying. It takes a while to create this type of effect. It is a very educational process to do so. But this is called Soldiers at Cards and Dice. So you can see, I thought compositionally, this little area needed a little something extra. So those of you of a certain age might remember that dumb game Mousetrap. No one ever played the game. They just had the stuff and made it work. You know, the ball rolls around. You know, I don't think I even had a full one because I think I got mine from Goodwill, where my mother shopped. And it was missing a couple of pieces, so I had to invent. You know, actually, it was good for my imagination to have to invent. Well, okay, the guy's going to jump into a lard can instead of whatever it was. So subtly, though, the game Mousetrap is dropped in as almost a garnish. The little mouse is under the hand here, and all the little accoutrement from the game is, well, not all of it, but just insinuated. So now it's Soldiers at Cards and Mice, because isn't that dumb? but it amused me. And I was one day painting in the gallery. It's an Italian gallery, so you don't get a lot of traffic. I was in there with just the guard. I'm intensely studying because you're just focused, and I hear this voice behind me go, "Is that Mousetrap?" I went, it was the guard. Yeah, is that okay? Oh, that's hilarious. I'm like, okay. I'm proud to be a member of Tag Gallery. It's filled with this delightfully talented, imaginative artists, and they're an inspiration to me, and I hope I can be one to them. Over the summer, we had a show, a theme show called The Rock, Paper, Scissors. And when we talked about it, you know, I thought, oh, I can do something with that. So in this case, I know it was you, Fredo. This model, who has passed, unfortunately, was a wonderful model. He would do anything you ask of him. He's set for this, and so now it's this kind of suggested a mafioso kind of thing. So the idea suggested itself within the format of rock, paper, scissors. So the paper guy is about to get it, I guess. Okay, now this one is interesting. I had a reader in first grade, like many of you might have had, the Dick and Jane series, C-Spot Run, that kind of thing. So many years forward from when I actually had that reader in first grade, I'm at a yard sale, and I find my reader. You had to sign your own name in the flap of the book. Like, this is mine. So I had to buy it. And I kept it all those years, and it had these wonderful gouache renderings of Dick and Jane and Mom and Spot and all those guys. And I wanted to do something with it. So this year I decided to do something because when my mother passed away, she was a hoarder, and she had tons of every tchotchke you can imagine. And one of her tchotchkes, unfortunately, was this giant concrete yard jockey, whose name was Jocko. And I encountered that as I'm dumping all this stuff in a dumpster, and I get to Jocko, and I'm like, oh, Jocko, damn. Well, I'm gonna transform Jocko. I'm gonna do something with him. It's like hope, like I'm gonna change that person. I'm gonna make him not a symbol of hate and humiliation anymore. So I hauled Jocko back to my studio in West Virginia, and I still haven't physically transformed him, but when I thought about putting Jocko into the context of this utopian 50s era world, it made sense to me in a satirical way. Again, pushing a rough message, a harsh message with humor, and in this case what I did was I recreated a page from the book. This is not verbatim from the book. I selected different characters and redrew them. And I put Jocko into it, and then got the lettering, and the backing you'll see in the gallery has a replicated back of the book, like the same back of the book, actually, the cover. So in this case, the only one with the moral center in this painting is the dog. Everyone else is like, that's a great idea, let's put that in our yard. The dog's like, what the hell are you talking about? So, is it controversial? Maybe, but it's one of those things, again, where people will be, oh, isn't that nice? It's some art. I had the painting in there that's game night. There's Jesus, the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, and who else is in there? Easter Bunny. They're around, and it's actually based on a Caravaggio, a Supper at Emmaus composition. So it was hanging right on that wall at one point at an exhibit, and again, kind of kibitzing on what people are reacting to. This family comes in, a daughter, mom, and dad, and very quiet. They're looking at it, contemplating it, and the daughter looks up at her dad and says, "Daddy, what's wrong with the Easter Bunny?" They're like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." And he just adroitly just looked at her and just deadpans, "Well, honey, he's deranged." And I went, "Oh, great, perfect. There's my payment." Salman Rushdie wrote, "A poet's work to name the unnameable, to point to frauds, to take sides, start arguments, shape the world, and stop it from going to sleep." I'm not a big Salman Rushdie fan, but I actually think that's a very interesting idea and want to be a part of that. And this is also a model that posed, and as a way of ending this, I'm sorry if I went on too long, she posed for us. The fly swatter, as they say in Appalachia, the fly flap, was an addition of mine, and actually it came before the idea of calling this show Chasing Flies. So it's kind of kismet that would happen that way. And there's my studio, which I built myself with my lovely wife Jennifer's help. So again, that was a creative activity, building a studio. And you can see Apes of Wrath are on the easel there at that time. This is 20 acres out in West Virginia, and I hope to hold retreats out there and workshops. It's a beautiful place. So thank you for your time, and thank you for coming to the show. Any questions, criticisms, insults you want to hurl my way, or? Yes?
Well, I thought it was awesome. So I got in, and I have seen you apes of prior with the gallery, but I wasn't familiar with anything else. So I turned the corner, and as soon as I see Lance here, I'm just like hit because I frequent, I'm not an artist at all, I frequent the
Yeah.
It's right there.
Right.
And it's great.
It's a giant, she's referring to this painting that's in there of this gentleman that's being rescued by these giant dogs. And I picked the painting. I never pick it because of what's in the painting as much as how it was done. And in this case, the bravura use of painting fur was very interesting for me to try to acquire or understand better. But as the little devil popped up, the gentleman laying in the snow being revived by these dogs had an open hand. Oh, come on. You know, he's got to have something in his hand. So again, that idea, like the Indians, well, what would he have now? Well, he's got a cell phone. But the irony of the painting is he doesn't have any signal. He's up in the mountains. So, ha.
So my point was like, you know, in one sense, at least from my conception, you know, you understand that art is for afflicting the comfortable and comforting the afflicted. And it's just like, you don't understand when you see the lens here, how kind of like emoting could be, because like, you know, it's there, it's flat on it. But your version is variation. And so I kind of like the idea that you kind of like putting back the kind of ferocity that should belong to
Thanks.
work of art, and it's really delightful.
One of the things I like, one of the things I like about working there too is that when I'm doing that, I think it makes the art more accessible for the people that come in there. It makes it more of a living thing when you're seeing it actually made instead of just like on the wall and how did that get made. So it's a super experience. Anybody else? Yes. Well, thank you very much. You'll have, yes?
So, I was wondering, you mentioned that you do figure study drawings at Hope College.
Yes.
What time are those?
Those are Fridays from 10 to 1. And then there's a full raft, as Corey can tell you, of classes that are held here. Lisa teaches a lot of them. I teach some of them. So refer to that catalog. There's a lot of quality art and a lot of talent in Frederick, Maryland. I'm proud to be here. Thanks, everybody.